30 days in an iron box where the air reeks of fear and the sweat of hundreds of men. 30 days when every minute you must choose between death and something worse. A woman in a men's prison transport car in the fall of 1938. This should never have happened. By all regulations, by all rules, this was impossible. But in September of 1938, Federal Transport 512 carried special cargo across the entire country, and in one of the cars, among 200 men, she was alone. "Stop! Everyone stay in place!" The guard's shout cut through the night silence. Witnesses recalled that the convoy stopped right in the middle of the Ozark wilderness, an unscheduled stop for water or inspection. They just stopped. The steam engine released pressure, and there came a silence that only precedes something terrible. In car number 7, noise began. First a muffled rumble of voices, then shouts, then the sound of iron striking against walls. "What's happening?" "Hey boss, what's going on?" Voices from different cars merged into a general roar. The guards ran to the 7th car. Dogs barked, and then everyone heard a woman's voice. One single female scream among hundreds of male voices. A scream that made blood run cold even in those who thought they feared nothing anymore. Her name was Helen Pritchard. At least, that's what was written in the documents preserved in the National Archives. 32 years old, former bookkeeper at the Packard Motor Plant in Detroit, charged under the Espionage Act of 1917, Section 3. Standard sentence for those years, 10 years federal penitentiary without possibility of parole. But what happened to her in September of 38 was anything but standard. "Listen to me carefully, Pritchard." These were the words of Captain Dwight Holbrook she heard an hour before they shoved her into the men's car. "You thought you could humiliate a federal officer? You thought you'd get away with that?" She hadn't been in the women's car from the very start of this transport. Witnesses remembered seeing the convoy chief, U.S. Marshal Captain Holbrook, personally order her transferred, supposedly for violation of transport regulations. What specific violation wasn't specified in the documents, but among the survivors, another version circulated. 3 months earlier, in the Detroit Federal Detention Center, Helen had rejected his advances. Not just rejected, struck him in the face with a glass inkwell when he tried to corner her in his office during an interrogation. The ink ruined his new dress uniform. His subordinates outside the door heard him scream in pain and humiliation. Car number 7 was the most terrifying in the entire train. That's where they put the 3-time losers, the murderers, the syndicate boys, those who'd already lost everything human. 200 men in a space designed for 4 triple-decker bunks welded to the walls, a honey bucket in the corner, one small barred window near the ceiling. The stench was so overwhelming that newcomers would pass out within the first minutes. "Well, well, boys, look what gift Uncle Sam sent us." A raspy voice from deep in the car. "No way. Abroad. Here. I'm telling you, a real live skirt." Helen stood by the door, her back pressed against the iron, looking at 200 pairs of eyes staring back at her. In that moment, time seemed to stop. The guard outside slid the bolt home with a clang. The train lurched forward, and what would later be called the most horrific 30 days in federal prison history began. To understand the scale of the hell Helen Pritchard found herself in, we need to go back several months. Detroit, March 1938. The Packard plant hummed like a disturbed hive. They'd just arrested the chief engineer on espionage charges. Black government sedans stood at the gate. Workers whispered in corners about who'd be next. Helen worked in the main accounting office, tracking raw materials. An ordinary American woman. Husband Roy was a tool and die maker, union man, 2 kids, Bobby, 8, and little Margaret, 5. They had 3 rooms and a walk-up on the east side. They lived paycheck to paycheck, but honestly. On Sundays, they went to Belle Isle Park. Summers, they'd drive up to a rented cabin on Lake Huron. Normal life of normal people trying to get by in hard times. "Mrs. Pritchard, you're wanted in personnel." Those words from the secretary marked the beginning of the end. In personnel, 3 men in dark suits were already waiting, federal badges gleaming on their belts, leafing through her personal file. The senior agent, a weary-faced man with graying temples, didn't even look up from the papers. "Helen Pritchard, you kept records of copper and aluminum inventory?" "Yes, sir." "There's a shortage. 6 pounds of copper wire." "Explain the discrepancy." "What shortage? All my documentation is in order, all requisition forms accounted for." "Documents can be forged, Mrs. Pritchard. Intelligence suggests you were diverting strategic materials to foreign agents." That's insane. I'm a bookkeeper, for God's sake." "A bookkeeper with access to strategic materials during a time of international crisis." The interrogations went on for a week, first at the plant security office, then at the Federal building downtown. Helen presented ledgers, cross-checked figures, proved her accounting was flawless. But the investigators didn't need proof. They needed enemies. Quotas for exposing fifth columnists and saboteurs hadn't been canceled. With war clouds gathering in Europe, everyone was suspect. On the 8th day, Captain Holbrook appeared, tall, square-jawed, with the bearing of someone who'd graduated from the Marshal Service Academy at the top of his class. He entered the interrogation room and dismissed the other agents with a gesture. "Mrs. Pritchard, let's speak frankly. You're an intelligent woman. I'm a reasonable man. Why these games? Sign a confession, testify that you were acting alone, confused. You'll get 5 years, out in 3 with good behavior. Your kids will still remember you when you get out. Don't sign." He spread his hands. "Well, we both know how these things go." "I can't sign to something I didn't do, Captain. I've got 2 children who need to know their mother isn't a traitor." "Everyone says that at first. Then they sign. The only question is how long it takes and what condition you'll be in when you finally see reason." He stood, walked around the room, stopped behind her chair, placed his hands on her shoulders. Helen smelled expensive cologne, something foreign, expensive. "There's another option, Helen. May I call you Helen?" He didn't wait for an answer. "You're an attractive woman. I'm unmarried. Perhaps we could come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. I could make this all go away. Your husband never needs to know you were even arrested. You go home to your children tonight." Helen stood abruptly, the glass inkwell on the desk tipped from her sudden movement. "Are you suggesting I whore myself to you in exchange for my freedom?" Such unladylike language. "I'm suggesting pragmatism, survival, a future for your children." What happened next took 3 seconds. Helen grabbed the heavy crystal inkwell, government issue solid as a brick, and hurled it at Holbrook's face. Her aim was true, hit him square on the bridge of his nose. Blood and India ink flooded his face, his starched white shirt, his dress uniform jacket. He screamed, clutched his face. Guards burst through the door. "Get her to the hole!" 30 days! Holbrook shouted, blood and ink dripping through his fingers. "That bitch just assaulted a federal officer!" In solitary confinement, Helen understood she'd signed her own death warrant. Not the legal one. That came 2 weeks later in a kangaroo court. But the real sentence Holbrook passed on her the second ink ruined his uniform and blood ran down his chin. Men like that don't forgive. Ever. And they have long memories. The trial lasted 15 minutes. Federal judge, no jury. Espionage Act, section on conspiracy to commit sabotage and aid foreign powers. Witnesses, co-workers who were also being held, testified that Pritchard had expressed sympathy for foreign ideologies, possessed seditious literature, made statements against the government. None of it was true, but In 1938, with Europe on the brink of war and paranoia running high, truth was whatever the government said it was. Sentence: 10 years in a federal penitentiary. But the worst, Helen heard in her cell the night before transport. A cellmate, an old, wobbly organizer who'd been through the Palmer raids 20 years earlier, whispered, "Heard from a trustee that Marshal Holbrook? He pulled strings to get himself assigned as chief of your transport convoy. Specifically requested it. Girl, men like him don't forget, and they don't forgive. Whatever you did to him, he's gonna pay you back tenfold. Watch yourself." And now, after 2 weeks of travel, with the women's car coupled off at a junction somewhere in Missouri, and ahead lay days, weeks, in the company of 200 men who'd lost all claim to humanity, Helen understood exactly what revenge Captain Holbrook had devised. He wasn't going to dirty his hands himself. He'd thrown her to the wolves, and he'd come check every day to see if there was anything left. But Holbrook hadn't counted on one thing: one old convict with a code. The first seconds in car number 7 stretched like eternity. 200 pairs of eyes, 200 dirty, exhausted, hollow faces, all staring at her. The air was so thick with the accumulated stench of unwashed bodies, urine, feces, and decay that she had to breathe through her mouth. But even then, the taste of that air settled on her tongue like something physical, something you could choke on. "Fellows, look here! A dame! A real live dame!" Someone's young voice cut the silence. "You're full of it, kid. What dame?" "I'm telling you, abroad, a real skirt, look!" From deep in the car, a figure rose slowly, deliberately, with the dignity of someone who runs the show and knows it. Every man in that car knew him. Crutch. That's what everyone called him, from Alcatraz to Leavenworth to every county lockup between. Old school con. One of those who remembered the chain gangs in Georgia before the reforms, who'd done time when guards could still beat a man to death and call it natural causes. Face carved with scars, knife fights, prison riots, things he never talked about. Eyes pale blue, faded like old denim left too long in the sun. Left leg dragging, the knee shattered by a guard's club in the Atlanta pen back in '23, hence the nickname. He walked through the entire car and people parted like the Red Sea. Even the young wolves, the ones who thought they were hard because they'd killed a man or run with the syndicate, knew better than to crowd Crutch. He had that aura. Violence so old and deep it didn't need to advertise. He stopped 3 paces from Helen, studied her for a long time with those washed-out eyes, evaluating. She didn't look away. First lesson her daddy taught her: never show fear to a dog or a dangerous man. Name? Voice like gravel in a bucket, smoker's rasp, maybe tuberculosis. Helen. What's your charge? Espionage Act. Political, then. He nodded slowly. Why you in a men's car? Feds don't make mistakes like that by accident. Helen paused. Everything depended on her answer. Tell the truth about Holbrook. She'd look like she was asking for sympathy, trying to play the victim. Lie, these men would smell it instantly. Convicts have a 6th sense for dishonesty. The convoy chief wanted to break me. I refused. This is his answer. Crutch's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, just a acknowledgement that he understood the game being played. He turned to face the car. Listen up, all of you. The dame's under my personal protection. Anyone touches her answers to me under the code. I make myself clear? Silence. Then from the far corner, laughter. Young, brazen, challenging. A man about 25 with 3 gold teeth stood up from the middle bunk. Jackal, that's what they called him. Leader of a crew of young punks who didn't respect the old ways, who thought the convict code was for fossils. Crutch, you gone senile in your old age? Abroad in a men's car? That's communal property, like cigarettes or commissary. What protection? You planning to take first turn yourself, old man? The temperature in the car dropped 10 degrees. Men shifted, created space, cleared lines of sight. This was about to go bad. Crutch slowly turned to face Jackal, and that's when Helen saw why this aging cripple kept 200 hardened criminals in check. Something appeared in those faded blue eyes, something ancient and terrible. The look of a man who'd killed and would kill again and sleep just fine afterward. Repeat what you said, loud, so everyone hears. Jackal understood he'd stepped over a line, but backing down in front of his crew was impossible. In prison, reputation is everything. Lose face, and you're dead. I'm saying, a dame in a men's car. That's nobody's. He didn't finish. Crutch moved fast, shockingly fast for a man with a bad leg. A shiv appeared in his hand like magic, probably kept in a sleeve sheath. One thrust under Jackal's ribs, precise, controlled. Not deep enough to hit anything vital, but deep enough to hurt like hell and make a point. Jackal grunted, clutched his side, blood welled between his fingers. Next time I'll puncture your liver and let you die slow over 3 days. Now listen close, pup. In this car, I decide who and what. I've been doing time since before your daddy was born. If I say the dame's under protection, she's under protection. You got a problem with that? We can settle it permanent. But you better kill me, because if you don't, I will sure as hell kill you. We clear? Jackal nodded, sliding down to sit against the wall. His crew froze, not daring to interfere. They'd seen Crutch work before. The old man was dying slow from the consumption, but he wasn't dead yet, and he was still the most dangerous man in the car. Crutch turned back to Helen. You said you could help the sick. Here's your first patient. Check the boy. This was a test. Helen knew it. Show weakness, show squeamishness, and the protection would evaporate. She had to prove she could handle this world. She approached Jackal, knelt beside him despite the filth on the floor, examined the wound with professional efficiency. Shallow puncture, maybe 2 inches deep, between the ribs. Bleeding, but not arterial. Need clean cloth for a bandage. The car erupted in harsh laughter. Clean cloth? Lady, you see where you are? Helen made a decision. She stood, turned her back to the crowd, an act of either courage or stupidity, and removed her undershirt. The last clean thing she owned. She tore it into strips under the gaze of 200 men, then bandaged Jackal's wound quickly, competently. He'll live, but if infection starts in this filth, I won't be able to help. Keep it as clean as possible. Don't pick at it. Crutch nodded with approval. Then, loud enough for everyone to hear, the dame sleeps here. He pointed to a corner near his bunk. This is my territory, has been for this whole transport. Anyone crosses into this space uninvited is a dead man. Now here's the new rules. The dames are medic. Anyone sick, injured, she'll help if she can. But any man tries anything other than medical treatment, I'll personally gut him from his balls to his throat and leave him to bleed out in that corner. Everyone understand? A rumble of acknowledgement. Even the hardest cases, the men who'd been looking at Helen like a piece of meat a minute ago, now saw something different. Not prey, a resource, something useful in this rolling hell. That changed the equation. One more thing, Crutch continued. Dame's got a name, Helen. Use it. We ain't animals. Night fell on the transport train, but in car number 7, nobody slept. They all waited to see what would happen next. The first night was the worst. Helen sat in her designated corner, back against the cold steel wall of the car. Crutch positioned himself on the lower bunk next to her space. Didn't sleep. Stood guard. The car was pitch black except for moonlight filtering through the small barred window near the ceiling. You ain't sleeping? Crutch's voice, quiet. No. Good. Don't sleep for the first 3 nights. After that, you'll get used to it. Learn to sleep with one eye open. But first few nights, stay awake. Why are you doing this? Protecting me. Long pause. Outside, the wheels clicked rhythmically on the rail joints. Somewhere in the darkness, someone coughed, wet, rattling. Someone else muttered in his sleep. I had a daughter, about your age. 37, they arrested her and her husband. Said they were Reds, agitators. She was a school teacher in Chicago. They shot them both. Claimed they tried to escape during transport. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Helen heard the grief underneath. You remind me of her. Educated woman. Don't belong in this meat grinder. I'm not a teacher. I was a bookkeeper. Same difference. Woman with brains and learning. They're culling anyone who can think for themselves these days. In the darkness, a sound. Someone moving, creeping slowly toward their corner. Crutch didn't even shift position, just said loudly, "One more step, Red, and you're a dead man. Back to your bunk." The footsteps stopped, then retreated. Crutch continued as if nothing had happened. There's 198 men in this car right now, not counting me and Jackal's boy bleeding in the corner. Maybe 50 are thieves and con men, professionals. Another 30 are politicals like you, communists, union organizers, people who spoke out. Rest are just regular fellas who killed somebody or robbed something and got caught. Every one of them's a man. And a man without a woman for too long becomes something else. Becomes a beast. So what do? Make yourself indispensable. Make it so every man in this car understands you're worth more alive and healthy than used up. You said you can doctor people. That's good, but it ain't enough. At dawn, the convoy arrived. 2 guards with shotguns and a sergeant. They passed in the daily ration, black bread, some kind of preserved meat that might have been Spam, hot water that passed for coffee. The sergeant peered into the car, spotted Helen in the corner, smirked. Well now, Red, how'd your first night go? The boys treat you right? Crutch rose, moved to the bars. Tell your boss the dame's under my protection. If he wants her dead, he should come do it himself like a man. Otherwise, he ain't gonna get the satisfaction. The sergeant spat tobacco juice. We'll see how long your protection lasts, old man. Captain Holbrook's a patient type. He can wait. After the guards left, the daily ration was distributed. This was its own ritual with its own laws. The thieves divided it among themselves first, then gave to the politicals, then what was left to the regular cons. Crutch gave Helen half his portion. Eat. You need strength. She chewed the stale bread, washing it down with lukewarm water that was supposedly coffee. Around her, the car's daily life proceeded. Men played cards drawn on cardboard with charcoal. Someone sharpened a shiv on the concrete floor. Others just lay still, conserving energy. Around midday, a man approached, scholarly-looking, glasses with one cracked lens, gray beard, intelligent eyes behind the dirty spectacles. Excuse me, ma'am. I'm Professor Whitmore, Irving Whitmore. I taught history at Columbia before. I heard you help the sick. I have a fellow, a neighbor on the bunks. He's been burning with fever for 3 days now. Delirious. Could you possibly look at him? Helen followed the professor to the far corner. On the top bunk lay a young man, maybe 25, drenched in sweat. She touched his forehead, burning hot. Typhus, or something close to it. Need to get the fever down, but I don't have anything to work with. She looked around, saw the water bucket they used for drinking. She removed her outer shirt, soaked it, laid it on the young man's forehead. Change this every half hour, keep it wet, and get him to drink just small sips, but constantly. The professor stared at her. Are you a nurse? No, but I spent summers with my grandmother in Appalachia. She was a midwife and herb doctor. Taught me some things. By evening, the young man's fever had broken. Temperature dropped. Word spread through the car like wildfire. The dame had saved someone at death's door. By nightfall, Helen had a line. Men with infected wounds, abscesses, dysentery, all manner of ailments. She helped as she could, lanced boils with a shiv sterilized over a candle flame, bandaged wounds with strips torn from the sick men's own shirts, taught basic hygiene practices that might help in this filth. An old con called Silas brought her his entire ration. "Thanks, sister. Had a abscess on my back, couldn't sleep for a week. You fixed it." By midnight, she returned to her corner, exhausted. Crutch sat in the same spot, still guarding. "You did good. Now half the car won't let anyone touch you. But this is just the beginning. We got 28 more days, and the worst is still ahead." From outside, a voice. Holbrook, come for his nightly inspection. "Car number 7. Inspection." The door scraped open. The captain stood in the opening, 2 guards with Thompson submachine guns behind him. His flashlight beam swept across faces, stopped on Helen. "Well now, Pritchard, how are you enjoying your new accommodations? The boys treating you right?" She said nothing. Holbrook stepped into the car. "I asked you a question. How was your first night? Did my boys show you a good time?" "She's alive, Captain," Crutch spoke up. "But so are you, for now, and we all remember that. All of us in here." Holbrook swung the flashlight beam to Crutch. "You threatening a federal officer, convict?" "Just stating facts. We all got sentences. Finite. You got a life. And lives can be interrupted. Trains derail sometimes. Accidents happen." The tension in the car became almost physical. 200 men holding their breath. Holbrook understood that one more second and there'd be a riot. He'd be pulled into the car, and guns or no guns, he wouldn't come out alive. He backed toward the door. "You got 28 more days on this train, convicts. We'll see who outlasts who." The door slammed. The bolt clanged home. The train continued its journey into the night. And in car number 7, the second night of this hell began. But Helen wasn't alone anymore. She had allies now, or at least people who needed her alive. Time would tell if that was enough. Day 5. The train crawled through endless wilderness, stopping only for water and inspections. In car number 7, a rhythm had established itself. Morning ration distribution, daytime stupor in the heat, evening conversations, and always, the never-ending stench of human bodies, sickness, and fear. "Hey, Doc, can I call you that?" A man approached Helen, about 40, with an intelligent face and graying temples. "I'm not a doctor, but call me what you like." "Name's Raymond. Raymond Fletcher, was an engineer at a steel mill in Pittsburgh. Now I'm an enemy of the state." He paused. In the car, pauses like that held entire lives, entire worlds left behind outside the bars. That morning, the thing everyone feared happened. One of the regular cons, a guy they called Mitch the Tailor, developed dysentery. In normal life, an inconvenience. In a car with 200 men and one bucket in the corner, a catastrophe. And more importantly, a symptom. "We're done for," someone muttered darkly. 3 days, half the car will shit themselves to death. Helen understood. If an epidemic started, only a handful would survive. They had to act fast. She approached Crutch. "Need to organize a quarantine, separate the sick from the healthy." "How you figure that'll work? We ain't got a hospital here." "Section off the far corner. Put everyone with symptoms there. Move the bucket there, too. Healthy people stay out of that zone." Crutch considered, then stood, walked to the center of the car. "Listen up. We got dysentery. For those who don't know, that's when you shit blood until you die. The dame says we need quarantine. Everyone with stomach trouble, move to the far corner, now. Everyone else stays out of there. What if we don't wanna? Someone from Jackal's crew shouted. Then we all die. Your choice. The simple truth of it worked better than any threat. By evening, 12 men had moved to the quarantine corner. Mitch, the tailor, 2 thieves from the lower ranks, several politicals. Helen organized something resembling an infirmary. Separate water for the sick and a rusty tin can, rags for hygiene, torn shirts that they'd burn in the small stove. Where'd you learn all this? Professor Whitmore asked, helping her. 1922. Our town in West Virginia had a typhus outbreak. Half the people died. My grandmother saved the rest. I was 10 years old. Helped her. You don't forget something like that. By night, Mitch got worse. He thrashed in delirium, screaming about his wife, his kids. Helen sat beside him, changing the wet rags on his forehead. Then something unexpected happened. Hey, Doc. It was Jackal, the same one Crutch had stabbed on the first day. He held out a small vial. Dark glass, no label. What is it? Opium tincture. Laudanum. Been saving it for emergencies. But the guy's hurting worse than I am right now. He needs it more. She took the vial, 5 drops in water. Mitch calmed, fell asleep. Jackal walked away, but before he left, he said quietly, About that first day. Sorry, I was hot-headed. This was a turning point. If even Jackal acknowledged her, she'd truly become part of this strange community, the community of the discarded. Professor Whitmore sat next to Helen when she stepped away from the sick. You know, I spent 30 years studying history, revolutions, wars, migrations, but only here, in this car, did I understand the main thing. A man remains a man, even in hell. Just not everyone remembers it. What were you arrested for? I gave a lecture on the French Revolution, described the terror in too much detail. Someone decided I was making comparisons to the current government. That night Holbrook came again, flashlight and guards as always. He searched until he found Helen near the sick. What's this, Pritchard? Playing Florence Nightingale? Think that'll save you? I'm not thinking about being saved. I'm doing what I know how to do. What you know how to do? Maybe you'd like to show me what else you know how to do. The whole car tensed. Even the sick went quiet. Crutch slowly stood, but Helen answered calmly. I know how to survive in places you think are impossible. And I know how to remember the faces of men who do evil. Memory's long, Captain. Holbrook stepped toward her, but then a voice came from the darkness, unexpected, loud, commanding. Captain, don't you think you're overstepping your authority? Everyone turned. The speaker was a man who'd been silent these entire days, sitting in a corner, not participating in conversations. Tall, thin, military-bearing despite the prison clothes. This ain't your business, Garrison. Colonel Marcus Garrison, former Chief of Staff, 5th Division, U.S. Army, and I personally know the federal prosecutor for the Western District. I think he'd be very interested to learn about your experiments. You threatening me? I'm informing you. This train arrives in Oregon in 23 days. There'll be more than just prison administrators waiting. There's going to be oversight. Holbrook froze. The Justice Department was the one thing even U.S. Marshals feared. He turned and left. The door slammed and the whole car exhaled. Colonel Garrison returned to his corner and went silent again. But now everyone knew there was another power in the car. Day 7 began with a scream, a piercing animal scream that woke everyone. In the quarantine corner, Mitch the tailor was dying. The dysentery had done its work. His body couldn't fight anymore. Help him! Please help him! His bunk neighbor was shouting. Helen ran over, but it was too late. Mitch stared at the ceiling with glazed eyes. The first death in the car. Everyone knew it wouldn't be the last.
"What do we do with him?" someone asked, confused. "Turn him over to the convoy at the next stop," Crutch answered. "Per regulations." But the next stop was 5 hours away. 5 hours with a corpse in the enclosed space, in the heat, during an epidemic. Helen understood this could cause panic. "Need to wrap the body and move it near the door where there's a draft." "Wrap it in what? We ain't got a morgue here." Then something happened that would later be called the miracle of car number 7. An old thief called Pops removed his only warm possession, a wool blanket. Mitch was a stand-up guy. Let him go out with some dignity. Others followed. Someone a shirt, someone torn socks. In 10 minutes, the body was wrapped in an improvised shroud of rags. Professor Whitmore quietly began reciting something in Latin. Turned out, it was last rites. Even the thieves listened in silence, caps removed. "He was a tailor," old Silas said suddenly. "Made suits on the outside. Good suits. He had 3 kids. Wife died of consumption last year. He worried about his kids all the time. Who'll take care of them now?" An improvised memorial service began. Everyone who'd known Mitch said something good about him. In this car, where murderers, thieves, politicals, and regular cons were thrown together, something human suddenly emerged, something that made them people. By noon, the train stopped, the expected stop for water. The convoy came for the body, but something unexpected happened. The sergeant refused to take the corpse. "Regulations. We don't take dead or sick from contaminated cars. Deal with it yourselves." "What do you mean, ourselves? We supposed to ride to Oregon with a corpse?" "Toss him out in the wilderness or keep him, I don't care." The door slammed. Silence hung in the car. Keeping a corpse in the heat for another 20 days meant guaranteed epidemic. Throwing it out, but how? "There's a grate in the floor," Colonel Garrison spoke up unexpectedly, "for cleaning the car. If you pry it open." Work began. With shivs, nails, anything at hand, they pried open the rusted grate. After 2 hours, they had an opening big enough to push the body through. But before they did, Helen said, "Wait, we need to do something human. We're not animals." She approached the body, closed Mitch's eyes, whispered something. Then louder so everyone could hear. "Michael Peterson, tailor from Detroit, father of 3 children. Died on the 7th day of transport to a place nobody returns from. But he died a man, and we remember that." They lowered the body through the grate. The train was moving slowly, and everyone watched it tumble down the embankment into the forest. Somewhere out there, in the endless green wilderness, Mitch the tailor remained, the first casualty of car number 7. By evening, new patients appeared in the quarantine corner, now 8 men. Helen did what she could, gave them salt water to prevent dehydration, monitored hygiene, but everyone understood. Without medicine, this was a losing battle. Then the second miracle happened. A man everyone considered a snitch approached her. Rat, that's what they called him. Small, wiry, always sniffing around for information. "Doc, here's the thing." He looked around nervously. "I got something, but it's a secret." He pulled out a package from inside his shirt, unwrapped it. Inside was a vial of white powder. Sulfanilamide. Stole it from the medic at the transfer station. Was saving it to sell, but he hesitated. "But what?" "My kid brother died of dysentery in an orphanage. He was 12. I couldn't help him then." Sulfanilamide in those conditions was worth more than gold. No, more than life itself. It was life for the dying. Helen started treatment immediately, dissolved the powder in water, gave it to the sick. By morning, 3 were better.
News of the medicine spread through the car, and strange things started happening.
The thieves began sharing their rations with the sick so they'd have strength to fight. The politicals organized a watch rotation near the quarantine zone. Even Jackal's gang quieted down, stopped causing trouble. "You know what's happening?" Crutch asked Helen on the evening of the 8th day. "You've turned a pack of wolves into, I don't know, into what we were before all this." "I'm just doing my job." "No, you're doing more. You're giving hope. And that's dangerous." "Why?" "Because Holbrook won't forgive it. He wanted you to die like a dog. Instead, you became a symbol. He'll come, he has to, and it'll be bad." Holbrook came on the 9th day. Early morning, but he wasn't alone. He brought 5 guards with Thompson guns and a camp doctor, an elderly man in wire-rim glasses. "Sanitary inspection," Holbrook announced. "Doctor?" "Morrison will examine the sick." The doctor entered the car, wincing at the smell, approached the quarantine corner, examined the patients, then turned to Holbrook. "Dysentery, but it's under control. Someone competently organized quarantine and treatment." "That doesn't matter. What matters is whether there's epidemic danger." "Not currently, but medication is needed." "Medication? For convicts? You're joking, Doctor." Morrison removed his glasses, cleaned them. "Captain, if an epidemic spreads to other cars, you'll be the one court-martialed as convoy chief." Holbrook went pale. That was an argument he couldn't ignore. An hour later, they brought a vial of potassium permanganate and a packet of activated charcoal into the car. Not much, but better than nothing. As Holbrook was leaving, he stopped near Helen. "Don't think you've won. This is just a delay. I've got 20 more days." She looked him straight in the eye. "And I've got a whole lifetime to remember your face, Captain." He struck her, hard, backhanded. Helen fell but didn't cry out and didn't look away. The car stirred, but Crutch raised his hand. "Not yet." Holbrook left and Helen got up, wiped blood from her split lip, and returned to the sick as if nothing had happened. That night, one of the men who'd recovered from dysentery, a former medic they called Doc, said loudly for the whole car to hear, "Brothers, this woman saved my life. By the code, I'm in her debt. Anyone touches her answers to me." Behind him stood the second recovered man. Third. By the end of night, Helen had a personal guard of 10 men. Holbrook wanted to break her. Instead, he made her stronger. Day 10. The train stopped in the middle of the night. Unscheduled halt. Sharp screech of brakes, shouts outside, dogs barking. Everyone in the car woke instantly. In places like this, you sleep light. Any change in rhythm can mean death. "What's happening out there?" someone whispered in the darkness. "Quiet, everyone. Listen." Crutch raised his hand. Outside, running footsteps, commands, then a single gunshot. 2 more. Silence. "Escape attempt," Silas breathed. Somebody made a run for it. Half an hour later, the door flew open. Holbrook stood in the opening, guards with flashlights behind him. The captain's face was twisted with rage. "Inspection! Everyone against the wall! Anyone moves, we shoot!" Soldiers stormed the car, started searching, rough, humiliating. Stripping men, searching every seam of clothing, looking for something specific. And they found it. In Professor Whitmore's jacket lining was sewn a small notebook, his diary, the only memory of his past life. "What's this?" Holbrook ripped out the notebook. "Personal writings, poetry, thoughts." "Seditious thoughts." Holbrook flipped through pages. "Oh, what do I see here? The system destroys its best." "What's this about, Professor?" "That's a quote from Dostoevsky." "Doesn't matter. This is seditious agitation during federal transport. Know what the penalty is?" "I know." "Death." Holbrook smiled. "Exactly. Take him out." But they didn't let them take the professor. Helen stepped in front of him. "If that's sedition,
Then I heard it too. Everyone in this car heard it. Shoot us all. With pleasure. But I've got orders to deliver the cargo. He pushed past Helen, but the professor doesn't have to arrive. You're not taking him. Crutch stood next to Helen. Behind him, Jackal, Doc, Colonel Garrison. One by one, they all stood. Holbrook drew his pistol. This is mutiny. I have the right. Go ahead. Shoot, Crutch said calmly. But the first bullet's yours, and the second's ours. We got weapons too. He showed a shiv. Behind him, others revealed theirs. Every other man had a hidden weapon. The standoff lasted a minute, an eternity. Then Holbrook lowered his gun. Fine, the professor rides. But when we arrive, you're all getting court-martialed for group mutiny. He left, and in the car, Professor Whitmore wept. An elderly man, a PhD, crying like a child. Why? Now they'll shoot you all. They won't, Colonel Garrison said confidently. I have a trump card. Last one, for emergencies. What card? You'll see, if it comes to that. 2 days until the final station, 48 hours, and everyone understood Holbrook wouldn't back down. The finale would be terrible, but what exactly? Nobody knew. Day 29, second to last day. The train crawled through foothills, approaching the final station, a transfer point before the labor camps in Oregon. In the car, a strange calm prevailed, the calm before the storm. Listen carefully. Colonel Garrison gathered the car's leaders around him. Tomorrow, when we arrive, Holbrook will try to stage a show execution. That's obvious, but I have information that could change everything. What information? Jackal asked impatiently. There's an inspection commission from Washington in Portland right now, arrived a week ago. They're investigating abuse of authority in the federal prison system. Several wardens have already been arrested. How do you know this? Prison grapevine works both ways. I have people on the outside. If we survive until the station and I can contact the commission, Holbrook himself will be under investigation. But Holbrook wasn't idle either. At noon, he came with a final offer. Entered alone, no guards, confident. Pritchard, last chance. Agree to special housing arrangements at the camp, voluntarily. I'll forget about the mutiny. Let everyone go, even the professor. Helen understood what he meant by special arrangements. Everyone understood. Go to hell, Captain. Think about the others. Because of your stubbornness, 200 men will suffer. Then Crutch spoke, slowly, deliberately, so every word hit like a hammer. Captain Holbrook, I'm a career convict with 25 years inside. I got connections in every camp, from Alcatraz to McNeil Island. If anything happens to this woman, anything, you won't see spring. That's not a threat. That's a convict's oath, witnessed by everyone here. That's threatening a federal officer. What threat? I'm just informing you of consequences of your actions. Like you've been informing us these whole 30 days. Holbrook left, slamming the door. And in the car, preparation for tomorrow began. Everyone understood it would be a battle, the final battle for dignity, for the right to remain human. That night, nobody slept. They sat in groups, talked quietly, remembered home, families, the lives left behind. Like saying goodbye. Helen sat between Crutch and Professor Whitmore, silent. Then the professor said, You know, I studied history for 30 years. Only now did I understand the main thing. History isn't dates and events. History is people who remain human in inhuman conditions. We're making history right now. History nobody will ever know about, Crutch said bitterly. They'll know. They have to. Maybe in years, decades, but they'll know. Morning of day 30 began with a crash. The train braked hard. Final station. Outside the window, gray barracks, guard towers with machine guns, barbed wire to the horizon. The labor camp greeting its new batch. They opened the cars in order. First, second. Screams of guards, barking dogs, women crying. Car 7 they left for last, deliberately. When they opened the door, a crowd already stood on the platform. Holbrook in dress uniform, a dozen guards with Thompson guns, the camp commandant, a fat major with a red face, and several men in civilian clothes. The inspection commission. Car number 7, exit one at a time. Hands on your heads. Crutch exited first, limping but head held high. Others followed. They deliberately held Helen back. She was to exit last. Commandant, Holbrook addressed the fat major. In this car there was a group mutiny, refusal to obey administration, threats against federal officers. I demand exemplary punishment. The major nodded reluctantly, but then Colonel Garrison stepped forward. Permission to speak. Colonel Marcus Garrison, former Chief of Staff, 40th Infantry Division, recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross. One of the civilians perked up. Garrison? The one from the Meuse-Argonne? Yes, sir. We met at a briefing in 21. You were with Army Intelligence then. The civilian, turned out to be a Justice Department inspector, approached closer. My God, Marcus, how did you end up here? Long story, but right now, something else matters. Captain Holbrook systematically violated regulations for treatment of prisoners for 30 days, deliberately placed a woman in a men's car out of personal vengeance, provoked conflicts. There are 200 witnesses. Holbrook went pale. That's slander. The prisoner was transferred for rule violations. What violations? Where's the paperwork? Where are the witnesses from administration? Holbrook was silent. Garrison continued. Furthermore, Captain Holbrook attempted to use his position to coerce prisoner Pritchard into sexual relations. There are witnesses to his visits to the detention center. Then something unexpected happened. From the line of guards, an old sergeant stepped forward, the same one who'd brought water. Permission to speak. I confirm the colonel's testimony. The captain did violate regulations, ordered us to withhold water, reduce rations without justification. We followed orders, but my conscience, he faltered. I got a daughter her age. Couldn't sleep nights. You senile fool, Holbrook screamed. What are you saying? Truth, sir. Just the truth. The Washington inspector turned to the major. Place Captain Holbrook under arrest immediately pending investigation. But this is mutiny. They threatened me. They defended themselves. There's a difference. Holbrook was grabbed by his own guards. He screamed about treason, enemies of the state, but nobody was listening anymore. Then something happened that entered the legends of the federal prison system. All 200 men from Car 7 dropped to their knees. Not before the authorities. Before Helen. What are you doing? Get up! She was flustered. Forgive us, sister, Crutch said, voice shaking, for not being able to protect you completely. For what you had to endure. You did protect me, all of you. You gave me back faith in people, she cried. For the first time in all 30 days, she cried openly, without hiding, and hard men who'd forgotten when they last cried wept silently, turning away. The Washington inspector approached Helen. Mrs. Pritchard, your case will be reviewed. Given the circumstances and witness testimony, there's a chance for sentence reduction, possibly commutation to probation instead of prison time. And the others? The ones who were with me? Their cases will also be reviewed. When they divided the prisoners into camp barracks, one last meeting happened. Crutch approached Helen. You asked why I protected you. I'll tell you now.
I had a daughter. They arrested her in 37. Me, I was already inside, couldn't do nothing. Found out later she died during transport. In a car like this. Maybe if there'd been someone like me there. Anyway, you live for yourself and for her. He turned and left, limping worse than usual. They never saw each other again. Decades passed. Those who survived tried to forget. Those who remembered preferred silence. The story of the woman in the men's car became legend, the kind told in whispers on prison bunks, not quite believed but not dared denied. In the 1980s, in a nursing home outside Detroit, an elderly woman lived. Quiet, unremarkable. She'd worked her whole life as a nurse in a neighborhood clinic, raised her children alone. Her husband never came back from the camps. Neighbors knew her as Helen, a kind grandmother who treated everyone with herbs and never refused help. She never talked about the past, her daughter recalled. Only sometimes, when trains appeared on TV, she'd flinch and leave the room. And she couldn't sleep in closed spaces. Even in winter, a window had to be cracked open. Old folks in that nursing home whispered. Some recognized her, some guessed. The prison brotherhood recognizes its own even after 40 years. Once an old man, a former convict, approached her in the cafeteria, silently bowed. She nodded back. They never spoke again, but every morning he held the door for her, and she nodded in response. In the 1990s, when it became possible to speak, memoirs appeared, scattered, contradictory, but all agreed on one thing. There was such a story. There was a woman. There was a car. There were 30 days that changed everyone. An old railroad worker from Oregon told his grandchildren how in 1938 his station received a strange transport. The guards were grimmer than usual. The convoy chief was arrested right on the platform, and from one car came a woman in a man's prison jacket, and 200 men silently parted to let her through first. Grandpa said he'd never seen anything like it, his grandson recalls. 200 convicts stood like at a funeral. She walked between them, head high, and many were crying. Imagine, hardened criminals crying. In Portland, old-timers still show the spot where the transfer station stood. Now it's wasteland, only foundations remain. But every spring someone brings flowers there. Simple wildflowers, leaves them by an old concrete block and walks away. A local historian collected survivor stories. He has a notebook, over 100 pages of handwritten testimonies. The accounts don't match in details, but the essence is the same. This happened, and it changed everyone who witnessed it. You understand the thing, he says, flipping through yellowed pages. In the camps, people saw everything. Death, betrayal, atrocities. But this story is about something else, about how in hell people remembered they were human. That's scarier than any atrocity, because atrocities can be justified by circumstances. But humanity in those circumstances, that's an indictment of the whole system. In the 2000s, a post appeared on an ex-prisoners forum. User, granddaughter. My grandmother died in 91. Before death, she asked me to say a prayer for 200 souls. Said they'd know why. Only later did I learn her story. Car number 7, 30 days. 200 men who remained human. Many responses. Some didn't believe. Some remembered similar stories. One wrote simply, I'm Crutch's great-grandson. Grandpa died in Oregon in 1939. In his last letter, he wrote, just tell the nurse, I got warm. Grandma never understood what it meant. Now I do. Historians debate whether this story was real or became a collective legend people want to believe in. But does it matter? What matters is this. The story is told, passed from generation to generation as a reminder, a warning.
a hope. Because if in a death car in 1938, among 200 condemned men, there were those who remained human, then humanity is stronger than any system. Then there's a line that cannot be crossed. Then even in hell, you can keep your soul. And everyone who hears this story asks themselves, could I? In that car, in that moment when she entered, could I have remained human? There's no answer. And thank God most of us will never have to find out. But the story remains, passed in whispers, written between the lines, living in memory. The story of car number 7, of 30 days, of 200 men and 1 woman. About how being human is always a choice, even when there seems to be no choice. Especially then.